Hello, this is Daredevil Born Again. The writer is Frank Miller and the artist is David Mazzucchelli. So this is just a collection of a bunch of Daredevil comics, and immediately I noticed that just like the format of this book felt very accessible because, it's lighter, it's smaller, like I could absolutely see somebody just like slipping this into their bag, their backpack or something very easily. And I think that once again, similar to the larger omnibuses, just having a collection of stories centered around one character does make it easier to follow. And I feel like it's a good way for somebody who's maybe interested in getting to know Daredevil to just pick this up and read about it. And I do have to say that works particularly well because even though this isn't going from the very beginning of his story, they do end up like addressing his origin story a little bit too. So even somebody for me who knew a little bit about the Daredevil character but didn't know maybe the specifics, it still felt very easy for me to pick it up and understand what was going on. And so this story is mostly about how Daredevil is going through a really tough time because the Kingpin discovers his actual identity, Matt Murdock, and basically makes his life a living hell. And we see this in the very beginning because Karen Page, his ex-girlfriend, basically sells his secret identity because she's trapped in Mexico with a heroin addiction. So we immediately start off the story in a very dark, gritty place. This isn't like there's nothing noble about, defeating villains and saving New York City. This is a gritty story about real people going through real challenges. And I think that's reflected really well in just the artwork here. Like, look at how gray and sad everything is. Like, the lines of light reflecting onto the faces, like the bars almost representing like the bars of a jail cell. It's very deep immediately. You get thrown down to this level and you realize, okay, this story is going to be kind of difficult. And it is, because you're dealing with really difficult themes like drug abuse or financial difficulties. Matt Murdock finds out that his assets have been frozen by the IRS. He's behind on his bills even though he's paid everything because the Kingpin has organized this as such because he wants to break him down. And ultimately, he does succeed in that. It's pretty sad, but Matt Murdock has no job. His girlfriend leaves him for his friend Foggy. He has no money. This is like very, very tragic. Like everything about his life is being destroyed. And we get to sort of watch Daredevil decline into insanity. There's this really, really great panel right here where he's in his costume and he's just beating people up trying to get information about Kingpin. And it's just the Kingpin, the way he describes it is he enters now as an angry beggar with no sense of caution or strategy. Because Matt Murdock is a very smart man. He's not acting that way. Like, he's just totally gone nuts. And it's very interesting that this is, I believe, the last time we see him in the Daredevil costume because he stops wearing it. And this is where we see the identities of Daredevil and Matt Murdock sort of bleed over each other in a way that isn't healthy because ultimately it was that separation that kept him sane and helped him sort of live his life. But now that that separation has disappeared, he's struggling and he goes kind of crazy. And I think the best example of this is when he can't live in his house anymore because it got repossessed. It got blown up, actually, by the Kingpin, just in case it wasn't awful enough. And he's living in this, like, really, really bad motel, and he's broke, and he has nothing. And he starts, like, becoming really paranoid that everyone is against him, that, the Kingpin is hired everyone. He's convinced himself that, like, his friend Foggy is in on it, too, which, of course, he isn't. And there's this really excellent panel right here that I feel like really represents this feeling. I mean, just look at the look on his face. You have this extreme close-up. You can see beads of sweat on his face. He's terrified. He's, like, convinced that the person on the other side of the door is coming for him. The person on the other side of the door is the hotel manager because he hasn't paid for the next day. And he throws him onto the floor quite violently. And this, for me, was the initial tip-off, like, whoa, something is really wrong. Because Matt Murdock is an incredibly moral person. Moral to a fault, even, maybe, sometimes. So this kind of reaction is really, really out of character. And it's pretty easy to see that, even if you weren't as familiar with his character, because in the beginning, you understand he's a superhero, he's a lawyer. You have all these people talking about him like he's moral, he's upstanding, he's a pillar of the community. He is not acting like a pillar of the community. In fact, he's on the subway, and there are some thieves who are stealing from people. They have guns, they're holding up the train, and he doesn't do anything to stop them. And then ultimately, he ends up beating them up, like, pretty brutally. And these are kids also, like teenagers. And he just goes nuts. He doesn't have any sort of self-control, self-restraint. I found that my favorite part where they were really showing his insanity was this part right on the top here, where he's talking on the phone to Foggy, except it's revealed he's not talking to anybody. He's talking to himself. And that was just really like the point of no return. Something is really wrong. So he goes to the Kingpin, he gets his behind handed to him. It's pretty sad to see. And his death is staged, and it's sort of like the lowest of the low. And I found this to be really impactful because it's so exciting to see heroes be miserable. You know, they're human. They're going through horrible things. He's at the lowest point of his life. He's not great. He's not noble. He's not saving anybody. And it makes it more relatable almost, and also more interesting, because I think that morally gray characters make us more interested. They make us want to lean in and examine ourselves, even just as people. And Matt Murdock is usually a character who is not morally gray. He's a lawyer. He is a superhero. You know, like, he has his strict code of honor and he follows it. He doesn't believe in hurting people when it's not necessary. You know, he's the type of guy to, like, bring someone into the police station, not beat them almost to death on the subway. And you totally see that sort of way of life, his ethos go away, crumble essentially, because he's faced with literally every single thing in his life that could go wrong, going wrong. And I think that is pretty relatable. Probably not to, the point that he experiences it. None of us are being targeted by Kingpin and, getting our assets frozen by the IRS, but it is still fundamentally relatable because we know what it's like to feel like we're drowning because everything is going wrong all at the same time. And I think that the best part about this story is that it's called Born Again. And it's called Born Again for a reason, because even though we get all the way down here at the absolute worst point it could be, it ends up being okay. Because the Avengers come in, they manage to basically confront Kingpin with what he's done and get him in legal trouble to the point where he can't come after Matt Murdock anymore. His ex-girlfriend Karen Page ends up coming back from Mexico, and they reconcile, and he totally forgives her for selling his identity, and they get back together and they live happily ever after until the next comic, of course. But I think it's really beautiful that we have this sort of clean slate at the end, where yes, everything was awful and horrible, but still somehow he pulled through. And it's pretty inspiring, because we know what it's like to be at the lowest of the lows, and it's nice to read a story about, maybe in the end, as horrible as it was okay. And I think that ultimately superhero stories were created to be uplifting. And I think it's really interesting that we have a sort of experimental format here where it isn't at all uplifting at the beginning, but I think that the lows make the highs even sweeter, and this is a really good example of that done in narrative storytelling. I think the last image here of the book is just Karen and Matt walking together, being happy together, and it's really sweet. And it's also a very large contrast from the first page, where you have Karen like that. So you can see the difference. And it's that emotional journey and the fact that there is such a difference in elevation that we experience throughout reading this that makes it more impactful and more touching. And this, of course, is only exacerbated by the excellent writing and the really, really powerful storytelling through illustration. And yeah, I really enjoyed reading this. I would definitely recommend it to people, even if they didn't know much about Daredevil's character. I only knew a little bit. I knew that he was blind and had enhanced other senses, but I found this definitely certainly entertaining, easy to follow along, and I think that certainly this format of this book is very accessible, and somebody could totally easily pick this up.